I encourage you to follow this ideal. By day and night you should contemplate that Brahman alone is real. Brahman alone is real. Act, think, and feel. Live your whole life in this, that Brahman alone is real. That Brahman alone is real. That Brahman alone is real.
Praptam yadvai tvanadinidanam vedo dadim matitva dattam yasya prakarane harihara brahmadi devair balam purnam yattu pranasarai bhaumanarayananam Ramakrishna stanum datte tat purnam patramidam bho. That nectar which has been obtained by churning the infinite ocean of the Vedas, into which Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and the other gods have poured in their strength, which is also charged with the life essence of the avatars, gods incarnate. Sri Ramakrishna holds that nectar in his person, in its fullest measure. Vedas, God's knowledge. Just as one is non-different from one's knowledge, so God is non-different from the knowledge. God is the Vedas. Om Agni mile pulohitam yajnasya devaritwijam hotaram ratnadhatanam. This is the first line of the Rig Veda, translated as, I invoke Agni, the one placed in front, the divine priest of the sacrifice, the invoker, the best bestower of gifts. Agni is a fire out in front there in the sacrifice. Agni is the God, and Agni is the Supreme Spirit. When these three levels of existence flashes in the mind, then we can understand the Vedas. Otherwise, it's just words, poetry. There is, Swami Vivekananda says, a book called Shabda Shakti Prakashika Nyaya, which speaks about two types of shabdas, two types of words. One is the Vedic and one is the Laukik, the Vedic words and the ordinary secular words. So when people read these words, they don't realize that these words are sacred, they are mystical words. And on repeating it, all the three levels of existence, Bhur, Bhuva, Swa, has to simultaneously flash along with the words. There are two types of truths, internal and external. truth that is derived from the senses and on reasoning thereof is called science. And truth derived from supersensuous perception through the practice of yoga is what is called yoga, is what is called Vedas. So these supersensuous truths flashed in the minds of those persons whom we call Rishis. There was a very long oral tradition, and it became imperative at a particular time to put this oral tradition in written form. And the one who did it was Vyasa. It was called Vedavyasa, or Maharishi Vedavyasa, the great sage Vedavyasa. He is recognized as the compiler and the editor of the Vedic literature. He went round, gathered the existing Vedic literature from different families who were given the task of preserving and protecting and handing it down to the next generation. He collected all of them, and the 4 books of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda were born. The Rig Veda is the oldest extant book of the human race. So these Rishis, and there were also the female Rishis called Rishikas, they through their intense concentration and purity intuited certain truths. These became the Vedas. So the Vedas are the rediscovery of certain existence truths. Existent with what? They are coexistent with God. They, as it were, read the mind of God. The word Rishi also means mantra drashta, the seer of mantras. It also means Krantadarshi, one who has the knowledge of past and present and future. They have broken the rod of time. This knowledge is intuited in their minds, and when they expressed it in something called the Vedic language, which was a precursor of the Sanskrit language we know. And to understand the Vedic language, one has to have Yashka's Nirukta, because some of these old traditions have almost died out. Until and unless you know what the word really means, it will become just another form of poetry. So Swami Vivekananda also says, I have seen the mantra which in shining gold. These mantras are seen. So this is the Vedic literature. And what does God do? You know, we are supposed to decode things, and we are decoding the Vedas. And when we decode the Vedas, what do we find? God, through knowledge, creates, maintains, and dissolves the universe. Now, the first thing that happens is tapasa chiyate Brahma. Brahman expands through tapasya, austerity. And what is the austerity? Tasya jnanamaya tapa. His austerity was knowledge. So knowledge expands at the time of creation. That creation emerges from the this knowledge, is maintained in this knowledge and dissolved in this knowledge. This knowledge is called Veda. And the word Veda, it comes from the root vid, to know. And this is the first thing that is encountered in this world. Knowledge. When we perceive, when we cognize things, everything is the knowledge. It is the basis of life. So this knowledge, this is the background of everything. This knowledge is the Vedas. When these truths were intuited, an oral tradition had begun, and then they were written down, and these truths became foundational for the later sacrifices which proliferated in society. So all these sacrifices, called yajnas, were the essential, you can say, prop of everything. From the Vedas, from the sacrifices and the philosophical underpinnings, emerged yoga, literature, religion, arts, sciences, everything, dance and drama, everything emerged from those initial ideas which were intuited by the Rishis. The whole society was formed and it was molded round these Vedic truths. And because of their extreme sanctity, these were preserved with strict intellectual discipline, as Max Muller had remarked. And it was handed down to the next generation of students and children. And this passed on down over and over and over till we come to this day. Even in today, we find there are many families who trace their lineage to those old rishis who were the rediscoverers of this Vedic truths. The names are found in the Vedas, and today we also have this. So it has been a very, very long tradition, still living, and it is being revived. Vedic culture. As we know, this culture, which many people who thought, oh, this is a culture, yes. But when you say it's Vedic culture, the whole culture was based on these Vedas. And the Vedas were based on super conscious experiences. So society itself was based on this super consciousness. People who came later on with their pugnacity and with their rustic outlooks and their kind of violence, with their materialistic outlook, could never imagine that a society can be built on knowledge, on the Vedas, super sensuous knowledge. And that has been the constant refrain of Indians. It's like, take for instance, the Tibetan society. Their whole society was based on their religion, nothing else. The same thing happened in India. It is also important to know that the level of sophistication, the truths were intuited in a cultural crucible, and that culture takes centuries. So these sophisticated thoughts did arise from that crucible. It does not arise without that kind of learning and discipline and intellectual honesty. And, you know, there are people, and still academicians and scholars, and So yes, the Vedas were brought into India by these invading Aryans. Well, that's a far-fetched dream. It can't be. You need people who are subtle, who are prosperous, who had time to cultivate the mind, and only in that you can expect certain truths to be flashing there. So each of these Vedas, when they were divided into 4, they had internal divisions also. The first was the mantra or the Samhita portion. The second was the Brahmana, the teachings of how to perform those rituals. And then we have the Aranyakas, and some of these Aranyakas are also Upanishads. So we lump them together. Aranyakas is the forest, that philosophy that arose from the forest, and the Upanishads. So it was a gradual internalization of this whole Vedic doctrines. From the external, it goes to the internal. That's the reason why the initial part of the Vedas is called the Karma Kanda, and the latter portion is called the Jnana Kanda, knowledge. The work portion of the Vedas and the knowledge portion of the Vedas. The Upanishads form the knowledge portion of the Vedas. So this, the Vedas, they are speaking the truth. And these truths are universal. It arose in the minds of certain Rishis, and we venerate them. But it was not any kind of sectarian, you can say, tradition. These Vedas are the literature, the sacred scripture of all humankind. We use the word, yes, it rose in India amongst these Rishis. But yes, it rose there. But it is a scripture of humankind. And this will be necessary for us to understand, because these mystical teachings will unravel the mystery of the human being. Swami Vivekananda is very clear. He's saying, does nature reveal the law of gravitation inch by inch? No, it reveals it as it is. No law is revealed bit by bit. There are some who will say, oh, you see, yours might be the oldest sacred books in the world, but ours came later, so ours are more authentic. It doesn't happen like that, Swami Vivekananda says. It is revealed once and for all, and these truths are these universal truths. Every truth which has been expressed in the Vedas have found resonance in the different conceptions of God. So we have conceptions of God from the lowest to the highest, from the personal to the universal to the impersonal. And that is what makes this Veda so rich. People will say, oh, there are so many conceptions of God. Obviously, it has to be. When I say God's knowledge, what arises in your mind? Maybe a person with a long beard and 2 hands and 2 legs. Well, that's your conception of God. It's not necessary to have just one conception of God and stick to it. As the human soul progresses towards that God, that same God will reveal her nature into higher and higher and higher dimensions. Swami Vivekananda also gives the example of, you take a picture of a sun as you travel towards it, and every time you click a picture, the sun looks different. So truth is like that. The more you approach to it, the more it will reveal itself. At the same time, we are seeing that same sun. It's appearing different. So truth is something like this. They knew that there are gradations of human minds, and everyone needs a place to stand upon on their faith. Swami Vivekananda, in his welcome address to the Chicago Parliament of Religions, says, I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of all religions. And I thank you in the name of millions and millions of Hindus of all sects and classes. What did he mean by this? The most ancient order of monks in the world, these are the old Vedic sannyasins. When people are building monuments in stones and other materials, here the Indian Rishis were building structures, mighty structures on spirituality. And they came to the highest point of spiritual discipline called renunciation. And they formed an institution. Nowhere in the world was the institution of renunciation formed as early as in the Vedic days. They were, as they say, hell-bent on realizing the truth. And the mother of all religions, that might be kind of, you can say, people might get angry. What's that? But it's not only in India. Every sect traces its, you can say, roots to the Vedic days. If they don't, they are considered heretical or unorthodox. If they do, they are considered orthodox. And the Vedas are the final authority, the sanction. They have to somehow use Vedic authority to authenticate their claims of their sect or traditions. And if you see all over the world, you will see the germs of religion, religious ideas everywhere, also found in the Vedas. You find a whole list of gods and goddesses, you find ancestor worship, you find all the ideas there. Swami Vivekananda says that even life that came out from outside the earth and settled down here, that too is found in the Vedas. All life is a manifestation of prana, that too is found in the Vedas. All material has come out from one primal material, that too also is found in the Vedas. It seems not only religious ideas, but even secular ideas have emerged from these ideas. And it is obvious, it has to be so. Truth had been declared once and for all there. And we today are in a unique position to understand these Vedas through the light of comparative religions and comparative sciences, literature, and every type. You know, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, well, if you squeeze the almanac, which predicts the rainfall for the year, you won't get even a drop of it. So if you squeeze the Vedas, you won't get a drop of knowledge. Yeah. It's only philology. It is only words and syntax. It's a way of pronunciation, and one has to give a whole lifetime for just this way. The words of the Vedas, as I say, are infinite, as I say. They are eternal. And as you have mentioned, they are coexistent with God. So what are the Vedas? In the primary sense, the Vedas are these super sensuous truths. In the secondary sense, They are but the books. So we should understand this and we not be fanatical about this is the only thing. And people have been fighting over books. Actually, it's a books fighting against themselves. My book is the oldest, my book is the youngest, my book is the best, and my book... Stop all quarrels. So from this primary source of knowledge has emerged, as the Vedas say, as from a fire kindled with wood containing moisture, diverse kinds of smoke issue. Even so, my dear, the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, the Atharva Angirasa, history, mythology, arts, Upanishads, sutras, pity verses, aphorisms, elucidations, explanations are like the breath of this infinite. They are like the breath of this Supreme Self. Everything has emerged. Even the books and you and me, and including everything, all knowledge has emerged from this Vedas. So it's a breath, and when you have breath, you have something called life, and when you have life, you have something called a mind. You have mind, something you have consciousness. So it is this consciousness of God that has given rise to each and everything. Reflecting on this itself should make us humble. Every object in this world, Swami Vivekananda further illustrates, first there is a thought, and then from the thought emerges the sound, and from the sound emerges what you call the object. It's called Shabda Artha Jnana Vishaya. So, in order to make this clear, Swami Vivekananda also quotes a Vedic passage, says, Suryo Chandramaso Data Yata Purvam Kalpayat Divam Cha Prithivim Chantariksha Mato Suvaha. So he says that the ruler ordained the sun and the moon, the earth, the skies and the heavens and the intermediate spaces. He created out them from the previous creation. So there is no starting point. The Vedas started at this point. Vedas are not historical. It transcends history. Vedas are not limited by time. They are eternal. They are constantly. Suppose you say, at 5,000 years ago, the Vedas were given by so and so. Oh, please. You're putting a limit to them. You're putting the knowledge of God within the covers of a book, which can never be. When you say that the Vedas are coexistent with God, and we say Vedas exited from the mind of God at this particular time, as Swami Vivekananda said, don't go on asking such inconvenient questions. You'll be smashing all theology. Creation is a continuous act that's going on and on and on. If we keep this in mind, the Vedas become eternal because God is eternal. The Vedas become infinite because God is infinite. The Vedas become imperishable because God is imperishable. So creation and creator, as it were, are two parallel lines running together. There cannot be a time when there was no creation. Otherwise, you'll have to say there's a time when there was no God. So this creation, which is a constant process, it goes through waves. So these millions and millions of galaxies and vast spaces around, you see them and you feel the life, you see the thought, you feel the sun on your face and the breeze through your hair. What are these? is nothing but the Vedas. You, me, every object, everything that ever existed and will ever existed are but the form of the Vedas. This must be kept in mind. The old Orthodox school was the cow exists outside because the cow exists in the Vedas. That was that orthodoxy. And the thought emerges. From thought comes the words or the sound. From that sound comes the concretization of that sound into an object. So the thought that rises in the mind of God, as you say, tapasa chiyate brahma. His austerity was knowledge. And as knowledge expands, the thought flashes in the form of the sound, which is understood by the Rishis at that level, and that further concretizes and becomes what is called this universe and everything in it. God's knowledge is the Vedas. God is the Vedas. And what are the Vedas? This manifested universe is the Vedas. It is not just simply books. So this has to be God and the Vedas and all the thoughts, everything has come from that Creator. You know, Latu Maharaj, Swami Adbhutananda, we celebrated his birthday yesterday. He was unlettered. And Sri Ramakrishna even tried to teach him the alphabet, but failed after 3 days of trying. Sri Ramakrishna says, there will come a time when the words of the Vedas and Vedanta will issue out of your lips. An unlettered person, Vedas and Vedanta coming out of his lip. How is that? He has through that super consciousness, which is the hallmark of these Rishis and Rishikas. Pushpadanta was very proud after writing an elaborate hymn on Shiva. And then he sees Nandi, who is the vehicle of Shiva, an associate of Shiva, smile and open his teeth. He gave him a toothy smile. And Pushpadanta, he saw that the words of the Vedas were written on his tongue, on his teeth. Everything is the Vedas. One time, the Rig Veda of Max Muller was recently published, and those books had been, somebody had donated the copies to the Pelur Mutt, and Swami Vivekananda discussing the Rig Veda and the intricacies of the language and the philosophy to his disciple Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. So Girish Chandra Ghosh comes and Swamiji says, so GC, he used to call him GC, you are not interested in all these. So I don't have the time, I don't have that type of mind to study this Vedas. But by Sri Ramakrishna's grace, I have crossed over all these studies and have gone straight outside. He takes the Rig Veda and makes pranam, salutes it, and says, glory unto Sri Ramakrishna, who is the form of the Vedas. Vedamurte. Even Swami Ramakrishnananda says of Sri Ramakrishna is a Nikhila Vedamurte. He is a complete form of the Vedas. Yeah, if we are forms of the Vedas, even he has to be a form of the Vedas. It's not just we. And Swami Vivekananda says about him in Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna, saying, because of the long lapse of time which decays everything, Dharma, etc., sects which had arisen from the Vedas had become so disparate, so isolated. They were living in their own kind of bubbles that they had forgotten their very foundations. Sri Ramakrishna comes and is saying every avatar comes to re-establish Dharma. And what did Sri Ramakrishna do? He came to re-establish the Dharma, Vedic Dharma, to show their common grounds, where exactly they lie. And he came in unlettered, like Latu Maharaj, to prove that in each and every person lies those Vedas, and if you can manifest them, you become a Rishi. Swami Vivekananda wanted each and every one of us to be Rishis. All of us have to be Rishis. Not with those long beards and those long kind of matted hair and with all those marks on the body. These modern Rishis will be able to intuit these super sensuous truth. So Sri Ramakrishna comes, he demonstrates to the people of the world what the real Vedas is, truth. And he approached that truth through various paths to re-establish their roots there. And not only did he practice all the disciplines in the Sanatana Dharma, Hindu scriptures, but also in Christianity and in Islam. So you find everywhere he has shown us where the root lies. And this is where we need to now converge. If we want to manifest the Vedas in us, we have to go to a place where they are already manifested. And in this age, these Vedas have been manifested in the life and the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. It is that super sensuous knowledge that the Lord has brought it down for us, for this age, so that we can go back and understand that this whole creation is divine. And this is the divinity that has been stressed over and over and over again. I started with the idea of Agni, fire. Fire, like this word fire itself, Agni, igneous, ignition, ignite, all the cognate words. Is that physical fire there in the front of us during that Homa or the Yajna. It is also a god, which is a presiding deity of the fire, and that presiding deity also is the Supreme Spirit. When we can see ourselves on these three levels, that we are also the tangible personality that we have, the intangible deity that we are, and that intangible deity is the Supreme Spirit. This is that universal truth that the Vedas have been speaking. You are universal. Tattvamasi. It does not say that, you will go and stay in that heaven forever and ever again. So these ideas also are there. But when it comes to the highest truth, it says, you are that infinite. You are that reality. You are that truth. You are universal. Why do you weep, my friend? And if we can understand ourselves on these three levels, but as Sri Ramakrishna says, in this age, it is life depends on food, annagata prana. You fast for a couple of days, all your Vedas will go away. Your meditation and all these things will go away. The Vedas say, Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat. Food is Brahman. So whatever you do, if you can understand this, your life will become divinized. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the earth that we move on, the trees and plants and birds and animals and beasts and everything, this whole universe has emerged from that truth, and you are that. That is the final, you can say, declaration of the Vedas. You are that. It does not say, take this lollipop and keep on sucking on it for all eternity. Who wants that lollipop for all eternity you're going to suck? You are that. You are the Vedas. That's why Sri Ramakrishna has incarnated himself with this age to manifest the Vedas in us. He manifested a Veda so that we will manifest these Vedas. And these Vedas is that infinite knowledge, and these Vedas is that God, that universal impersonal God. You can take God in any sense you want. You have to manifest that God. This is God's knowledge. And as He is the protector and you can say ordainer of these Vedas, He is the protector and ordainer also of all His creation. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Announcements. Next Sunday, 7th March, Swami Satyamayananda will speak on I am the destroyer of karma. On the 14th is Sri Ramakrishna Puja, Sunday, 14th. So it will start with worship at 10 and home of fire, etc. and 5:15 talks by Swami Satyamayananda and Swami Satyamayananda, just to keep you kind of, you can say, informed about it. It's a whole day program. Tuesdays, we have at 4:30 p.m. Swami Sarvadevananda giving Narada's Way of Divine Love. Also on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., Swami Sarvadevananda gives a talk on the Shanti Gita. Wednesdays, we have the Gospel, 7:30. Thursdays, we have the Bhagavad Gita at 7:30 p.m. by Swami Satyamayananda. Fridays, we have 7:30 p.m. Living Wisdom of Swami Abhedananda by Swami Atma Tattvananda and Atma Vidyananda. Saturdays, 10 a.m. the morning, the meditation classes, meditation skills for meditators by Swami Satyamayananda. The Sundays, of course, we have a Sanskrit class online by Sukirta Alagar Swami. 6th March, Saturday, 6:30 p.m. is Ram Now. And just to keep you in advance notice, 11th Thursday, from 6:30 p.m. is Shivaratri. So this is the great night of Shiva. We worship Shiva. Om Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartribhyo. Salutations to Brahma, salutations to all the Rishis. So the first question is, Drake McInish, what are the origins of the names of the 4 Vedas? Rik, Yajus, Sama and Atharva. The Rik is the meter, and it's a Rik meter. So all mantras which had this Rik mantra, Rik meter, they fell into the Rik. There are some Rik mantras that can be sung, and that became the Sama Vedas. So Sama is the song Veda. So these were the first Vedas that could be sung. And even today, this kind of thing. Yajus is the old ideas of, you can say, Yajna, was the mantras were used was Yajus. And Atharva is credited with the sage Atharva Angirasa. That's why Atharva Veda is called Atharva Angirasa, the family of the Angirasas. So that's the 4 Vedas. We have, Lara says, thank you for this grand knowledge of the Vedas. Okay. Drake also continues, did Vyasa contribute to writing on the Vedas or only compiling into Vedas? No, he only compiled the Vedas. And he also saw that there were certain sections of the Vedas that were lost. Certain families were given certain portions of the Vedas to safeguard, to cultivate, and to hand it over to the next generation. And due to some disease or some kind of, you can say, natural disaster or something, that family or that village itself was wiped out. So that section of the Vedas was lost. What Veda Vyasa did was, he, through his meditation, he revived some of these old sections of the Vedas. He put them in a story form, which is called the Mahabharata. So that's why Mahabharata is called the 5th Veda. And, like I mentioned, it is imperishable. You may destroy the books. You cannot destroy them. There was one devotee in the gospel you find. So he used to constantly chant the Om, Om, Om. And then he fell sick or something. Then the doctor came, and he's telling the doctor, oh, please cure me, but don't cure me of my Om. So these truths are existent and eternal, and they can be revived. And that has been the, you can say, tradition of It's not one or two Rishis, but numberless Rishis. And even today, if you can intuit those truths, you become a Rishi. So he went around the country, they say, collecting all the material and compiling them. Drake also asks, how do the Brahma Sutras compare to the entirety of the Vedas? The Brahma Sutras are aphorisms in order to make a kind of a linkage or order to bring together in a stream of a thought the various aspects of the Upanishadic philosophy, and those sutras or those aphorisms string them into a coherent whole. So they have come much, much later. They are attributed to Badarayana. So the Vedanta Sutras, they are called Vedanta Sutras, the Brahma Sutras. They form the third, you can say, the triad of the Hindu religion. The Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutras, and the Upanishads. So they are logically put in a kind of a sequence. That's Nirupam. Could you elucidate how Vedas are the divine essence of God? Is the knowledge of Vedas distilled in the Upanishads? Well, you can listen to this talk again. I spoke about that. As I said, when these rituals, yajnas had increased manifold, and people were so busy performing them, certain guys, not very kind of enthusiastic about spending some time like this, they internalized those very ideas. So you find in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that whole Ashwamedha Yajna, which was very elaborate, now the whole thing has become internalized. So this internalization of these Vedic, you can say, ideas are nothing but the Upanishads. So yes, you can say that they are internalized, if you like, distilled in the Upanishads. So here we are. So thank you all. Everything is all thank you, thank you, thank you. Bas. Oh, good. Om Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartribhyo Vangsha Rishibhyo Namo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhya Sarva Plavarahita Prajnana Ghana Pratyagarto Brahmaivahamasmi. Salutations to Brahma, the one from whom the Vedas have come. Salutations to the Rishis, salutations to the Guru, salutations to all the great ones who made it possible for this truth to be delivered to us. That which is the raft which takes us across the ocean of the world, salutations to that knowledge of Brahman. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.